In the last section, we got a handle on some of the basics of Go. We learned about the long form of variable creation, but then we learned that usually we're going to end up using this compacted syntax where we list the name of the variable, we say colon equals, and then the value to assign to that variable. Again, colon equals tells Go that we are about to create a new variable or initialize a new variable, and that Go needs to figure out exactly what type of data that variable needs to be. So in this case, Go is going to kind of infer that we want to make a variable of type string right here. All right, we're going to do a little bit of code cleanup. So I don't really want this extra declaration up here. So I'm going to delete the big comment. And then I don't really want to reassign a value to card. So I'm going to delete that as well. Now I want to figure out a little bit more about the basics of Go. I want to say that maybe when our main function is automatically called for us, maybe we do not immediately know what value we want to assign to the card. So I want to try defining a separate function. So a separate function besides main. And whenever main gets executed, I want to call that function and return the type, or excuse me, I should say the value of the card that we're trying to create. So essentially, rather than assigning the value of ace of spades directly to card right here, I want to call a function that will return a string of ace of spades. So let's start off by defining a new function. Defining new functions inside of Go is going to take the exact same syntax as what we used for the func main function right here. So I'm going to say func new card, and then define the function body with a set of curly braces. Now inside of here, we're going to use some very basic syntax to create a new string or new value of string and then return it from the function. Now the syntax to do that with Go is going to look really familiar to you no matter what programming language you're coming from. So whenever new card is called or whenever it gets invoked, we are going to immediately return a string. So I'll use return, and then we'll say how about 5 of diamonds, like so. And so again, no matter what programming language you're coming from, yeah, this return statement's probably going to look pretty familiar. Now to make sure that when our program is executed, we call that new card function and assign the result to card right here, I'm going to delete ace of spades and replace it with a call to the new card function that we just created. So I'll say new card, like so. Now I'm going to save this file, and when I do, VS Code is going to figure out whether or not we've got any errors in our current file. And it looks like, yeah, we've got something going wrong here. So let's hover over the return statement down here and figure out what's going on. So the error says, too many arguments to return. Have string, want, empty, or nothing. And so that message is essentially telling us that we just wrote a function that is expecting to return no data whatsoever. But we wrote in a return statement that returns a value of type string. So we need to update our function declaration right here to inform the Go compiler that whenever the new card function is executed, it's going to return a value of type string. To do so, immediately after our parentheses right here, we're going to put a space and then write in the word string. I'm then going to save the file, and when I do, I should see that error message go away. So let's talk about exactly what we just did. The error that we saw said that the function that we wrote out here was attempting to return a value of type string when we had said that nothing would be returned. In order to tell Go a little bit more about the function we just made, it requires us to always be very explicit and tell it exactly what data type we are going to return from any given function. So by closing off the parentheses right here and then writing out the word string immediately after, that tells the Go compiler that whenever new card is called or whenever it gets invoked, it is going to return a value of type string. So now, when we call new card right here, if we hover over it, you'll see this little tooltip and it says, okay, new card is a function and it returns a value of type string. And so Go is still able to infer, it's still able to figure out with this little colon equals operator right here, that the value, or I should say the variable, the variable card is going to be of type string, because Go knows that calling new card is always going to return a variable of type string. And so if we hover over card, you'll see that it's still labeled as being card, which is of type string. So essentially, you can kind of very quickly start to see the pattern here. where at some point in time, Go is always going to expect us to label the type of data that is being exchanged around our different functions inside of our program. Now, just one last time to really hammer it home, because we're going to see this syntax many times throughout this course, I want to break down the syntax of that function. So we declared a new function by using the func keyword. The function has a name of new card, and then we informed Go that whenever this function gets executed, it will return a value of type string by writing out the word string right here. Now remember, Go has many different basic types associated with it. So in this case, we said this function is going to return a string, but we could have just as easily said that it's going to return a value of type, say, int, or float64, or boolean. So maybe really quickly, let's try replacing that type string with type int instead. So back at func new card right here, I'm going to find type string. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Now this thing is going to return a value of type int, or integer instead. Now if I save the file, again, we're going to see this error message pop up. And if we hover over it, it says, hey, you're trying to use the value of 5 of diamonds, which is a string, as an integer as a return. So something to very quickly learn with Go here is that the error messages that you get are usually very helpful in helping you figure out what's going wrong. And so don't kind of look at the error message and say, oh, something's wrong, I need to go Google this. Read the error message and try to figure out what it's really telling us. This is saying that we are trying to use a value of 5 of diamonds as type int. But clearly this is not an integer, this is a string. And so we could fix this error by instead, say, returning an integer of 12. So now if I save this, the error message goes away. If I now hover over card, you'll see that card is now inferred to be an integer rather than the string that it was previously. Okay, so again, just a little bit of an example of using a different return type here. Now, of course, we really do want to be working with strings because all of our cards are essentially going to be strings. So I'm going to undo that little code change like so, and I'll save the file. Okay, so we now got another piece of basic syntax under our belt. We figured out how to declare separate functions and how to assign return types to them. So let's take a break, continue in the next section, and there's one little last topic that I want to discuss before we really dive into implementing our cards project. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.